Alright, Rouselle, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Salut, Rouselle, how are you? I hope you've had a lovely week. Well, I say that. I know exactly what you've been doing all week. You haven't really had a great week, have you? You've been on LBC, weirdly posing as a trans woman who runs a charity.
Gillian's in Newcastle. Gillian, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Thanks for having me on. I run a charity in the South Coast supporting the needs of transgender people right across the UK, but based in the South. And you said many things I wanted to say, so thanks very much.
Yes, I found that an extremely interesting conversation. I don't know if you came off better against James O'Brien or not. You did reasonably well. But why not just phone in as yourself? Don't be ashamed of who you are, Rouselle. That's not like you. Pride, identity, that's what's important, isn't it? And that was your theme also when you were talking to the BBC this week about the criticism that the show had become too woke. It was part of a carefully coordinated counter-offensive on the comms grid to convince ordinary people who have been swept up in this argument that they are in fact wrong, and that contrary to what they've heard, Doctor Who isn't a sort of camp spectacular full of right-on ideological messaging. No, it's just a show about kindness and inclusivity.
There are online warriors accusing us of diversity and wokeness and of involving messages and issues, and I have no time for this. I don't have a second to bear, because what you might call diversity, I just call an open door. It's like we open a door and there is the world, and you breathe it in and your lungs are full of the air, and it's cold and it's bracing, and there's a world in front of you. There's a blue sky and there's clouds and there's noise, there's bird song, and there's people arguing, and there's a rattle of pans from the kitchen, the smell from the kitchen, and someone over there is dancing and someone over there is arguing. That's how to write, to get that whole world into it. Some people maybe just open a window, a crack. Those windows in hotels you can't open properly. Really annoying. Really, they open a crack, and some people just look through that and they breathe in exhaust fumes and they stare very hard. Maybe they can see a field of England in the distance. Fine, stick with your narrow window. Over here's a big open door, and those people who are dancing now, everyone's dancing, and it's glorious. That's the place to be.
And when I was reading that conversation, which I felt you were having with me, you don't have to do it through a proxy, by the way. Don't contact the BBC press. Just give me a call. Or better yet, come on the channel and we'll have a chat about it. It's fine with me. I spoke to Stephen recently. You saw what a roaring success that was. Well, why don't we have a chat too? But anyway, let's just address for a moment this quote before we get into Lux. And there's plenty that we can talk about that will tie into this theme that I'm warming to of inclusivity, wokery, and all the rest of it. Let's just pause just for a moment, if we may, to consider what wokery actually means, because this is the crux of the whole culture war, isn't it? This is really what it's fundamentally all about. It's about language and how we conceptualize the world, what the words mean. This is what this argument has become about, ultimately, because, look, you can recall, you know your Orwell, Rouselle, and you know that George Orwell had this thing about language, and he was very, very clear, wasn't he, that they who control language, who control speech, control the conceptualization of the world, and if an elite of people control how we speak and what we think of when we hear certain words or write down certain words, then they can control how the rest of the population think. You know, if language is perverted, if language is twisted and contorted, or indeed inverted, then reality becomes a sort of an abstraction, doesn't it? And that abstraction is vulnerable to bad actors who would seek to manipulate it to their own ends. Yes, you would agree? Freedom is strength, you know, war is peace, etc., etc. So, are we worried about a show that's inclusive and kind? No, of course we're not. Although Doctor Who wasn't always about kindness, was it exactly? I mean, there was a lot of nastiness in Doctor Who. A lot of good people have died in Doctor Who. There's been a lot of cruelty in Doctor Who. Sometimes the Doctor himself was cruel, so it wasn't always about, you know, kindness and cheerfulness and being on the side of righteousness and light and joy and so on. When the Doctor was strangling Perry, there wasn't much light, was there?
A Perry at the gate of Eden stood disconsolate. Who wrote that?
I haven't the faintest idea.
Of course you don't. You don't even know what a Peary is, do you? Perry?
No.
I'll tell you. A Peary is a good and beautiful fairy in Persian mythology. The interesting thing is, before it became good, it was evil. And that's what you are. Thoroughly evil.
Doctor, stop it!
No, not even a fairy, an alien spy. Sent here to spy on me. Well, we all know the fate of alien spies.
That was an attempt at psychological complexity, you know, the post-regenerative madness and all the rest of it. Yeah, Doctor Who used to be more morally ambiguous in the days before the Doctor was just a sort of big-hearted crier. This blubber, this guy who always had a tear streaming down his cheek. The show's a lot more jaunty now, isn't it? A lot more whimsical under your watch. Even the theme tune's like that now. You know, it used to be creepy and ominous, and now it's... You know, you're almost supposed to be doing this while it's... No, that's not the tone, Rouselle. Anyway, just to clarify, the issue with Doctor Who today is not that it's nice, not that it's jaunty and whimsical and big-hearted, but that it's edgeless. It's edgeless and it's boring and repetitious, and it's so preoccupied under your watch with telling us how to think and how to feel that it's lost that crucial element, which is the ability to surprise us with innovative forms of storytelling. And I say that because despite Lux being a relatively interesting concept, the idea of a cartoon in a cinema that comes to life and, if you like, consigns the few patrons to a life of purgatory on 35mm film, that's fine. That's a perfectly interesting Doctor Who'sian kind of concept. You know, it's clever of you to tie the God of Light to an artistic medium that requires light to work, like cinema. That's a good idea. Interesting. Don't say that, you know, you don't have conceptually interesting ideas, but you never develop them, do you? Now, I've got to be careful here, because there was a trap built into this episode of Doctor Who, of course. The emergence of the fans. The fans as you imagine them to be. And let's skip right to the end for a moment. We will come back. We'll boomerang back to the beginning. But let's just talk about that awful, fourth wall breaking, show ruining moment when the Doctor climbed into the living room of Doctor Who fans as you imagine them to be. Sort of drippy, wide-eyed, "We love you, Doctor," kind of people. People without a single shred of cynicism, or indeed self-awareness. They had canine mugs. No Doctor Who fan owns a canine mug, Rouselle. They're not the big sellers. And I'm sure, if you've got one, don't write to me, or don't send me a photograph of it. I don't give a fuck. You're one of like 8 people. Alright? Real Doctor Who fans don't watch Doctor Who with a Tom Baker scarf or a fez. That's how they may see themselves in their own twisted minds, but they don't watch the show in costume. And, you know, they've got a little bit more going on. They've got a little bit of a little bit more wryness, a little bit more cynicism. I mean, you wouldn't dare, would you, have had the Doctor climb into my living room, into this room. Because in this sort of universal crossover I'm imagining, the audience would not take well to the fan telling the Doctor and Belinda to get fucked. Yeah, I love the show, but just don't like what you've done with it. Sorry, the two of you. Would you mind getting fucked? No, really, fuck off. So this drippy, imaginary constituency of young and diverse Doctor Who fans, who, of course, their favourite episode is Blink. Of course it is.
Blink.
Definitely Blink.
Blink. Every time.
Not the one with the goblins?
Blink.
I met the Beatles.
Blink.
Not the one where I am standing on a landmine. That was brilliant.
Blink. What happens in Blink?
It's the story where you're not allowed to blink.
Well, that sounds like an absolute epic.
They weren't gonna surprise us or pull a rabbit out of a fucking hat and say, "Oh yeah, it's my favourite, The Enemy of the World," actually. Yeah, City of Death. That's nobody over the age of 30 has any fucking idea what I'm talking about. I hated the incursion into the real world and the acknowledgement of the show as a real thing. When a television series acknowledges its own artifice, it becomes a self-reflexive parody of itself. It can no longer function as a dramatic unit of integrity. Not if there's an acknowledgement that it's just fiction, it's just storytelling, and storytelling that's been consumed apparently by some of the most feckless, one-dimensional people out there. You know, they rejoiced at the end with, "Oh, we're still here." But that's the problem, isn't it, Rouselle? They're the only ones who are left. You've stripped the fandom of everyone else. People who actually have some interest in the show, having a little bit of depth. And I think this was really an episode for me about almost sort of aggressively attacking your critics. You know it's over, don't you? Of course you do. You've seen the writing on the wall. And so we've got episodes that feature your idealised conception of the fandom, who, of course, have got not one single criticism of Who passed. Little bit of this particular episode, but nothing serious, nothing heavy. It would have been amazing if that group had called for the show to be cancelled, wouldn't it? That would have been astonishing. But when the fans are telling you how to finish your episode, or telling the Doctor and Belinda how to save the day, then the show sort of jumped the shark, hasn't it? And I know what you're going to say. Well, that's the point, you see. I'm running against the keyboard warriors. I'm basically subtly telling them, stay in your lane. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to, put it in an episode as a sort of a joke, the fans steering the Doctor to the conclusion. But in reality, I don't want you having any of that sort of input. I don't want people telling me how to write this show. Alright, fine. We get it. Get the joke. It's very funny. But if you had listened to real fans, not the imaginary version, but real fans of the show, then you wouldn't be in the shit now, would you? I'd like to see a Riley cynical god. That'd be nice. If Doctor Who exists in the real world, in Doctor Who, then Doctor Who is over. Discuss. Mrs. Flood, Anita Dobson, Angie Watts, to her friends, again present at the end of this episode, is part of that fourth wall breaking element that you've introduced. This sense that Doctor Who might now be existing as a byproduct of Doctor Who. No. And by the way, there'll be people who will write in and say, "Oh, but remember in Remembrance of the Daleks, where it cut to the announcement of the first episode of Doctor Who in November 1963." Well, it cut away, didn't it? It cut away before they could say Doctor Who. In this episode, talked about Doctor Who, talked about episode titles. Doctor Who is a show that exists on a channel called the BBC. I mean, this could have been a great idea if the Doctor had pushed back a little bit, I thought, and said, well, that would explain why I am the way I am. You see, inwardly, I don't feel like myself. I'm not a blubber. I'm not a crier. I've always been a deeply complicated, highly cultured human being. Earlier in this episode, I found myself talking about Scooby-Doo with Belinda, and I said, I didn't mean it, but I said, "Oh, I'm Velma. I'm the inquisitive one that's coded as a lesbian." I didn't mean it. Even as I said it, I thought, that's not the sort of thing I'd say. I don't really believe that. I don't even really know who Velma is. I don't watch fucking cartoons. I'm a Time Lord. And that's way beneath my frame of reference. And then earlier still in the episode, Belinda said something stupid like, your planet, what's it called? Time Lordia? And I said, I wish it was called that. But I don't wish that. I don't think that. Of course, Gallifrey is a wonderful name for a planet. Time Lordia is silly and camp and childish. So I don't really believe that it should be called that. Why did I say it? Why did I agree with it? Why did I humour? Why didn't I slap her down and say, don't be so fucking ridiculous? You're talking about, the zenith of civilization. What are you talking about, Time Lordia? What are we, 5? don't feel like myself anymore. I feel like I've been hijacked by a mediocre writer's tastes. I'm not me. I can't express myself as I would wish to, with the degree of complexity that I'd wish to express myself. And I choose the type of people to travel with that I would never travel with. The moment that it was obvious that Belinda wasn't interested in any real form of time travel. I mean, you know, she wanted to go back into the TARDIS about 2 minutes after we'd gone out into the world of 1952. I'd dump that fucker by the roadside and just leave, sod getting her home. She'd rather attend to bedpans than travel with me. She'd rather look at the warts on old men's scrotums. She's more interested in looking at old Bob's stumps on the geriatric ward. It's like having a cat that won't go outside and won't eat. Just leave it to die. But if you're telling me that I'm being written by Russell T Davies, now I understand. I understand why I'm not me. And why, in the truest sense of the word, I haven't been me for an extraordinarily long time. Not since, I would say, about 1989, actually. Makes sense. Makes sense. And it makes sense why all of my stories are kind of one-dimensional. I was up against a two-dimensional villain in this show, and there were lots of references to being well-rounded and, you know, acquiring depth, and this is a lazy writer, you know, having a bit of fun at their own expense. But the hard work would be to write me in a way that I did have depth, that I was fully rounded. But, no. That's not what it's about, is it? It's about mediating a message that reshapes the universe in a way that this writer feels comfortable with. Could I be that show that the fans once adored? A show that doesn't care what its two hearts are for. You don't watch it anymore. Anyway, acknowledging the show's artifice is a mistake. And one wonders where it's going to go. Because, of course, Mrs. Flood is going to be revealed at the end of this run of episodes, this what may be final batch of episodes. This could be the last batch of episodes of Doctor Who made for some significant period of time. And at the end of this series, Mrs. Flood's going to appear, probably as the fucking controller of BBC television, and say, I've decided to cancel the show! And we're going to have an ending very similar to Moonlighting. You remember the ending of Moonlighting? I know you do, Rouselle. Which they had a very meta conversation, very meta for the late 80s, and they said, yes, our time as a TV show has ended, and, well, I guess from the end of this episode we won't exist anymore. And, you know, they were having this chat while bits of the set were being deconstructed and taken away behind them. But Moonlighting was a show that frequently acknowledged its own artifice and did have fourth wall breaks and was meta in that sense. Doctor Who is not. It cannot transition, if you'll pardon the expression, from one to the other without breaking fundamentally what it is. How can we take anything seriously in this universe if it's all just fiction? Nothing matters, there's no jeopardy. It breaks the contract with the viewer, doesn't it, if we make that distinction? Because what we're buying into when we watch a show like Doctor Who is the idea that there is stakes. People do matter. The fate of characters is important. Yes, we know it's not real. But we dare to suspend our disbelief just for a little while we enjoy these stories. If we're not even permitted to do that, there really is nothing left for us to chew on, is there? It's all just been a massive waste of time.
Hi, I'm Madeline Hayes, and this is David Addison.
Right. And we'd just like to take a minute or two before the show starts to welcome you back to another season of Moonlighting.
That's right. That's wrong.
Wait a
I don't
second.
know why I'm here. I don't know what I'm doing here.
You're here because we're welcoming people back to another season.
Ha.
You're here because the network wants us to welcome the viewers
Double
back.
ha.
You're here because Lou told you
We
to
can
do
say it. We can say it. The network says tonight's show is too short. The network says every show has to be 1 hour long, not 59 minutes, not 61 minutes,
Well, you see.
60 minutes long, and we're a minute short.
Great, now the whole world knows. Mr. Thermopolis,
And do you know
Mr.
why
Ehrlich,
we're a
I'm
minute
very
short?
Karen, get my
Because you
agent on
talk
the
too
phone,
fast.
please. Not
You
because
slow
I'm
down
talking
once
fast,
in a while.
because you're
Maybe we could
talking
have
when
a show
I'm
that lasts
talking.
an hour. That's it. I've had
That's it. If the
the
producers want to welcome the viewers back,
they
let
can
them do it themselves.
So what else to say about Lux, the god of light, who was defeated by going outside, so he could dissipate into the universe? Maybe he was sucked into a black hole, which, given his camp temperament, he probably would have enjoyed. And yes, I did say that with a little bit of camp. I'm playing up to you, Rouselle, you see. I'm trying to become part of your world, so you can understand what the fuck I'm saying. The Doctor is not the Doctor anymore. The Doctor is your gay best friend. And he's a lovely guy. He's a smashing guy to spend time with. Sheedy Cat was a very likeable chap. But he's not the Doctor. And why do I say that? Because I think the Doctor has just got to have a little bit more texture. He can't just be a big bag of emotions. He's also got to have a bit of an edge. And there should be at least one generation's difference between the Doctor and his companion. Why do I say that? And I know that hasn't always been true in the show. Don't write in. Don't do that. But it's it's good visual shorthand if that's the case. I mean, the Doctor is always significantly older than anybody he's travelling with. But when he appears young, and he talks young, and he acts young, and he appears to have the same pop cultural references and reference points as the young, he becomes indistinguishable from the young. And then you have the age-old problem that the Doctor and his companion could be, well, essentially the same character. They could be flatmates. And that's a disaster for the show and the show's dynamic. I laughed out loud when Belinda framed Rock Hudson as the man she'd learned about on her HIV training course. What a lovely little aside that was. Really sweet. Rock Hudson, that's how he'd want to be remembered. That's how he'd want to be introduced to a whole generation of science fiction fans who didn't know who he was. He was one famous Hollywood actor, one of the first to die of HIV publicly. It's wonderful. Looking forward to your episode on Gene Hackman, where you mentioned that his last on-camera performance was as a desiccated, part mummified corpse on the floor of his own home on the body cam of a New Mexico police officer. Don't talk about, his contribution to the motion picture arts and sciences. Let's remember him as the unfortunate victim of Mother Nature. Good old Rock Hudson. Yeah, he died of HIV. What a guy. The Doctor said in this episode that he waits for people to topple the world. He was talking about racism, of course. But in the meantime, of course, he'd be fabulous, or he'd shine, or something along those lines. Yeah, great. Smashing. Smashing. You know what topples the world, or destroys the world as we know it? It's the systematic deconstruction and then destruction of things that we love in popular culture, like Doctor Who, for example. Projectionist playing to an empty cinema was a nice touch, very modern. Bit of a comment really on how cinema has become a nostalgic experience that we all look back on fondly, but no fucker actually ever attends anymore. Why not? Well, there was no mention of the fact that streaming services like Disney Plus that co-fund Doctor Who have been instrumental in destroying the cinematic experience. That would have been brave of you to mention, but you didn't quite get there. These days, cinema audiences are segregated, but they're segregated between those who enjoy the cinematic experience and those who prefer to sit at home with their penises out, eating butterkiss bought from the local Asda while looking at TikTok on their phones or something. Now that, by the way, that's a scene that would have been fascinating for the Doctor to climb into through the TV, wouldn't it? Oh fuck! Sorry. Those are my fans. Those. No, I'm not talking about me. I'm saying you're imagining, like you did, imagining a generic type of fan. It doesn't matter. Forget that. Well, I'll probably cut that out. It's not important. So that's it, really. There's no more to say about Lux, is there? Another episode wasted in a very, very tight batch on our way to almost certain destruction. And we're left with that horrific image of those three generic, imagined Doctor Who fans. His favourite Doctor Who episode is Blink.
Blink. Definitely Blink. Blink. Every time.
Blink. I mean, Blink's a good episode. Memorable, sure. I don't imagine that in 30 years' time, someone's going to crawl into the living room of some Doctor Who fans in a future iteration of Doctor Who, and they're going to say their favourite episode was Lux. I'll have a little bet with you now that won't happen. Shall we say a couple of £1 million? Come on. You'd write it to spite me, wouldn't you?